Hello, hello. Michelle, you're back?
I'm
Good.
here.
All
Hi.
right. All right. Happy Friday. Yay. I'm so excited for today. Sorry for the little technical glitches there, but I'm sure most of you know the song, Lovely Day. We're going to have a lovely day this afternoon with our mocktails and mentoring session. So, Lovely Day is one of Kenya's favorite songs, as well as you saw her favorite mocktail. So we're honoring her in that way as we start this session. Also, we started with the little Break My Soul by Beyonce, the new Grammy GOAT. So, again, another phenomenal Black woman that we started off honoring today. So, I want to tell you quick, I don't want to hold us, but wanted to share a little bit about how this session came to be. And so some of you may have heard of the Executive Leadership Council, otherwise known as ELC. Altria has had a relationship with ELC for a while. We've had several Altria executives sit on the Executive Leadership Council. We've had Jennifer and Neil in the past, and our newest member is Kenya Blake. What happens with that is we sponsor some of, and Michelle is a new ELC facilitator now, right? Michelle,
Yes,
congratulations on
thank
that.
you.
So excited. So as we think about programs in the future with ELC, perhaps our paths will cross again, Michelle. So with the ELC, they have different levels of programming, one of which is their mid-level manager symposium. Altria is a sponsor of that program, has been a sponsor for a number of years. With that sponsorship comes the ability, the opportunity for one of our members to moderate a session. So Jennifer did it last year with Minda Harts. So this year, I coordinated with Kenya to see, which one we wanted to do in 2022. So we picked Michelle Smith. You'll hear so much more about why we chose her when we get into this session. But at the end of this session, Kenya called me almost immediately. Okay, that was amazing. We have got to get her in. So I was like, okay. And so, Kenya's like, oh, well, who do we invite? Is it just, our mentoring circles? And I was like, nope, let's blow it up. We're going to invite lots of beautiful Black and brown faces. So that's why you are all here. We are going to record this session. So if your sister girl is not on the call, please send her a note. Tell her how amazing, I'm already claiming it, how amazing the session is. You can send her the recording. We will put that up and post it shortly. I hope you all have your favorite mocktail or beverage with you because this is going to be good. So hold on, buckle in, and I will now turn it over to Kenya.
Thank you for that, Joy. Good afternoon, ladies. Welcome to Mocktails and Mentoring. This space has been curated to be all about you and you achieving your leadership aspirations. This is a space that is meant to recharge your battery, refill your cup, re-energize your soul, however you say it. It is a space from which we hope you choose to reemerge from, ready to take on the necessary work and the challenges to fulfill your leadership aspirations and potential. To help us bring the relevant content to this space, we have a special guest with us. And ladies, you are in for a phenomenal treat. Today we have about an hour and a half with the amazingly accomplished and inspirational Michelle Smith. And I promise you, her content around leadership life lessons, leadership affirmations, and how to apply them to fuel the achievement of your career aspirations can really change your professional trajectory. Michelle is the CEO and founder of No Silos Communications, LLC, which empowers high-performing women executives, especially women of color, to lead like the rock stars they are. She is an ICF certified executive and personal coach, working with leaders in Fortune 500 companies like American Express, Microsoft, Amazon, CNN, just to name a few, and then, of course, for the Executive Leadership Council. She is the author of the award-winning book, No Thanks, 7 Ways to Say, I'll just include myself. Michelle is also the creator, the executive producer, and host of the Culture Soup podcast. She is a highly sought after keynote speaker, facilitator, panelist, and host on everything in the landscape of tech, business, and culture's intersection. We are so fortunate to have Michelle, and I want to give as much of as possible of her to you today. So we're going to get started. We're going to jump right in. Are you ready, Michelle?
I'm so ready. Kenya, thank you so much. I appreciate that warm welcome. And Joy, thanks for all the work, Courtney, and everyone that's working behind the scenes. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, Michelle, it was back in October of last year that I first read your book, No Thanks.
Mhm.
And since then, I reread it, and then I probably read parts of your book every month. And the section's determined by what's going on with me professionally and
Right.
personally. Your book is grounded in applied psychology, and it uses a framework that makes the content extremely approachable and memorable. It introduces 7 affirmations, which is why is this approach important to you, or advantages to share what you have called your love letter to your sisters?
Absolutely. Thanks again. You know, one of the things that has come to mind when I think about my sisters, and especially as I think of my journey in my career, is that much of what's keeping us behind is access. Access. That's the word. I think of myself as somewhat like Nike. You know, Nike is there for the athlete. I center the leader. And as I center women of color, I look at the data that shows that so many of us make it to mid management, mid career, and in that leadership pipeline, we're spewing out. And it looks something like this. Women in general are spewing out, okay? But the ones that are leading the way are Black women. And this is even more exacerbated with the pandemic. Black and brown women are spewing out of the leadership pipeline and even the corporate pipeline faster than any other group.
Mm.
And so I had to ask myself, why is this happening? Some of the best companies out there that are doing well in diversity, equity, and inclusion cannot answer this question. And oftentimes they lean into the typical, well, it's lifestyle and that season in their lives where they're thinking about family. Or for the pandemic, they would say they were primarily the caretakers. But it's more to it than that. What I found is once you get past that gap in the leadership pipeline where everybody's spewing out who's a woman, especially Black and brown women, is when you get into this elite area of corporate America, where you get to those directors and VPs and AVPs and EVPs and C-level folks, and you have to ask, well, what do they have that other people don't? One of those things I've found is that certified executive coach. So often that individual is reserved for VP and up, maybe a little bit below. But how many of you have been offered an executive coach if you're below a director level or VP? Probably not that many of you. And it seems that many of these leaders are just killing it. And you're wondering, how do they do that? Well, the secret is they don't do it alone. They have folks like me. So I decided to take that idea of a wing woman, an executive coach, and put it in a book. So there's another book coming, and we'll talk a bit about it later. This is one of the secrets that I believe that has been gate kept for so many of us who don't make it past a certain level in corporate America that could help us now to close that gap.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Now, your love letter
Mhm.
starts off with the affirmation, I know who I am, and I find value in my story. In this section, you talk about how knowing your value, and equally important, how to articulate it, can impact your leadership aspirations. Can you expand on that and why it's important?
Listen, when you read the book, you'll probably be seeking out who's the heroine in the book or the hero in the book. And you may think it's me because a lot of my story is in it, or you may think it's some of my mentors and sponsors because their stories are in there, like Cent Marshall, the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, who used to be the chief diversity officer at AT&T, where I used to work. You may think it's Cheryl Atkins Green, who's the CMO of Mary Kay. These ladies have extraordinary stories and have overcome so many barriers before. But the heroine in the book really isn't any of these ladies, but it is something that all of us have in common. And that is we understood our value. And when we got to that point where we did, because many of them tell the story of how they made it to where they are now, most of us did not understand our value when we first came into our careers. But as we progressed, we discovered it. And there was probably some turnkey moment where we discovered it. So the heroine, the hero in the book is knowing your value because that unlocks so much of the other affirmations and your ability to actually achieve them. Understanding your value means that when others try to deem your value for you, you know whether they're correct or not. How many of you have had folks that have tried to speak over your life, good or bad? People who try to tell you what your value is. I will tell you because they don't know you as well as you know you, unless there's somebody really close to you that's pulling for you, that's in your community. And we'll get to the differences between the community and the network and all of that good stuff. But someone who actually really, really knows you and is pulling for you may have an idea of your value, but no one knows your value other than yourself better. And that requires that you know yourself. And that's beyond your title, your name, even your family name, or even where you're from. It's those things that made you who you are, the good and the bad. And there's some exercises that we can do that help you to plot that course because they're keys to your future and your past.
Thank you, Michelle. I know we didn't talk about going down this path, but can you just talk a little bit about, give us a few clues to how we begin to ascertain our value, how we begin to crystallize it for ourselves? Just give
Sure.
us a little bit.
Absolutely. So there are two separate kinds of value that I want to make a distinction over. One is intrinsic value. And that's the value that comes from inside. It starts with the fact that you are fearfully and wonderfully made and that you deserve the best just because you are. You also deserve the best because you are excellent. And we talk about this, and we talked about this at ELC, Kenya, where we're talking to the Eagles in the room. We're not talking to the folks who may still be struggling with, getting a good evaluation every year. I'm talking about the ladies who are killing it every time. It's important that you understand that every excellence, every bit of excellence that you put out there deserves a return on investment. And that's when you understand your value intrinsically. But then there's extrinsic value. Extrinsic value says, well, what's my market value? How much am I worth monetarily? And that requires that you go out beyond just looking at Glassdoor to see what other people are making and find out for yourself. When you look at that total rewards form and that you get every year that has the total value of your compensation, including your benefits or what have you, and you can take that bottom line number and go to the market and ask for your value and see if you come back with 2x, 3x, 4x. That's when you're going to know your extrinsic value. If you can understand both the intrinsic and extrinsic value, let me tell you what that does for you. You can walk those halls at ALTRIA with your head up high, with more confidence than you probably did before. And you can go into rooms and speak on topics without editing yourself or fear that someone's going to say, who does she think she is? And let me tell you, sis, if they're saying that, you're probably on the right track.
I'm going to stay in this values piece just a little bit longer.
Yes.
Just hang in there with me, Michelle, because you always talk about stories and you always incorporate stories into each one of your affirmations. Can you just talk about how our stories are intertwined with our value?
Absolutely. Our stories make up who we are. If you do that look back on your life, you see a collection of stories. Those stories are the building blocks of who we are as human beings. And that actually feeds into our intrinsic value. If you know your story and you know it well enough, it also gives you the power to open some doors and influence people that you may not be able to influence otherwise. Because stories are interesting. Neuroscience teaches us that stories are the number one way that we remember as people series of numbers and items and things. Let's see, a great way to put it. If you are looking at a dollar bill and you look at that serial number, there are probably about 13 letters and numbers in that serial number. Do you think that if you looked at that and looked away that you could recite those letters and numbers? It's probably difficult. Somebody there could probably do it because you have a photographic memory, but most of us cannot do that. What they know about our brains to be true is that stories allow us to not only remember, but internalize. So there's power in the stories that you tell yourself, and that's positive psychology. And it offsets any negative stories that your brain may be telling you yourself about yourself. But also the ability to tell your story to other people allows them to deem value to you. So your story is very important and how you share it. And I tell a lot of stories in the book.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Now, your second affirmation, I'll be excellent and good with the skin I'm in, is a philosophy I introduce all my mentees to day one. And it's a mantra that's embedded in my own head. I'll be excellent and good with the skin I'm in. Can you talk about this affirmation a bit and how being excellent can and will make a difference in your leadership aspirations?
Absolutely. So we talked about, I'm talking to the Eagles. We're all Eagles in this room, and we have brand equity in our names. Okay. But the only reason why we have that is because we are excellent. And as I say in the book, and the title of the companion journal to the book, slay every day. You have to slay every day. And the importance of that is that's the passport to authenticity, to even betting on yourself, and in fact, even knowing your value. If you know how excellent you can be, that you can kill it every time, no matter the job, small or large, you know what you bring to the table. And when other people recognize that excellent, it makes you unimpeachable when it comes to your capabilities. In Eagles, we've got to get that conversation off the table. They can't question whether you can actually do the job or not. You want to remove that factor, and the way you do it is to be excellent. That's when you start to operate in that ability to be uniquely you. And I'm not just talking about hairstyles. And believe me, I was the one at the Fortune 10 with the curly blonde, strawberry blonde fro and the nose ring. Why? Because I understood that my work was excellent. And if they didn't like the work, I'd take my fro and my nose ring somewhere else because I knew my value, right? But beyond the look, we're talking about the work style, the communication style, the leadership style. This is where you get to color outside of the lines if you want to, because you've already established that you're excellent. You're going to get that job done, and everybody knows it.
You actually touched on this a little bit. We hear so much talk about the importance of being authentic, bringing your authentic self to work. But in your book, you wisely raise a point that as it pertains to Black women, that it's really a tall order when we're asked to be authentic and bring our authentic self to work. And when you consider the research has called us, the workplaces, double outsiders.
Yes.
How do we show up as our true selves in an environment where we're just, you use the word center of the plate. We're not the center of the plate in the workplace.
That's the key question, because leadership experts and business books and even Harvard Business Review, up until a point, they've gotten a little better about a little bit more nuance, has been thrusting upon us the importance of authenticity as a leader. And it's true. It's very important. But how are you to show up as your authentic self when you know that in a space you are othered? When everything that makes you you is not the order of the day. Let's think about the word corporate. Corporate means one body, one body. So that means that when you go into this environment, Even the word diversity and authenticity actually speaks to diversity. It's code for diversity. How in the world are you supposed to show up as something else, as something different? If there's this push-pull that's always going on to become something else. Because when you think about it, if we're not centered in the workplace and someone else is, understanding that you have to become one means that you probably have to change yourself. That's the real conflict that we have as people of color, as women especially. We're intersectional beings. We check several boxes. Some of you check more boxes than others. But here we come with all our boxes, and we're told to show up as our authentic self, when our authentic self, many times before we even open our mouths, is othered. So how do you do it? Well, I have a mentor coach, and she came from the ELC. God bless the ELC. I'm a 2-time fellow. I've been through the courses. I've been coaching. I've been speaking. And now I get to fill the shoes of the Trudy Bourgeois of the world and show up for people like you who want to show up at Leadership Development Week and Power Women of Work, whichever one it is. But she told me this. She said, we don't do code switching anymore because code switching requires that you cover. And covering means that part of you that makes you you, whether it's your gender and it makes you feminine, that you cover that so that you can be included with the men. We don't do that anymore. Okay, code switching, that's so 2001. Okay, now we do style flexing. What is style flexing? Style flexing is where you understand that you're always yourself, but you have a volume dial. And you turn that volume down in rooms using your intelligence, your emotional intelligence quotient. You turn that volume down. When you go into spaces and read the room and you understand that they don't know you yet, they don't know your value, it has not been communicated, they're just getting to know your work. So you turn the volume down on who you are, but you're still who you are. And then you communicate by showing them the work, the data, the research. Over time, when they get to know you, when they start to value you, and you've taken the idea of your abilities off the table, your capabilities, your, what's the word? I've forgotten the word, but your ability, your competency, you take that off the table. And then you can start to shine, sis. You turn that volume up. Now, there's a question you need to answer before you turn it all the way up. Do they deserve all of you in the room? Now, we don't ask that question if we don't know our value. We're too busy putting the value on the company and saying, oh, my goodness, well, maybe I shouldn't, and I should just flip back to code switching. But here's the thing. Certain rooms and certain spaces do not deserve you. So think about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just pause for a second and see, Courtney or Joy, are there any questions in the chat or anything you want to put forth right now before we continue? I just don't want to ignore the audience that we have today.
No questions yet. Everyone is doubling down on the style flexing and knowing your value and, do they deserve all of me? So yes, keep it going. Keep it going.
Okay. Very good. Very good. I'm going to skip to affirmation number 4.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be my best advocate. Affirmation number 4. I'll be my best advocate. What I found interesting about this chapter is that it speaks to being one's own best advocate actually involves relationships. It's not really about you and you tooting your own horn. It's about relationships and advocacy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So being your own best advocate means that you are engaging other people on your behalf so that they can go into rooms where you can't see or you'll never go and speak on your behalf, that they can see around corners that you may not be able to see around. Being your own best advocate means that you are thinking of yourself while building those relationships with other people. This is where we get into the conversation about building and activating your tribe. So often we hear people talking about the kitchen cabinet or the personal board of directors. I call it a tribe, but they don't really give you the nuts and bolts on who should be a part of this. You kind of guess, you figure maybe mentors, maybe some sponsors, but that's about it. And they definitely don't tell you how to activate it. This is one of the number one ways you can actively advocate for yourself. And that is to build a tribe that believes in your mission and acts on it. So, Kenya, do you want me to share who should be on the tribe?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
We wouldn't let you leave without sharing.
All right. So your tribe should definitely be made up of mentor sponsors. Let's add in peers. Okay. And let's add in juniors. All right. Now, the reason why we want to add these last two groups is because in my world, there's no power. We eliminate the power in the tribe. And you may be going, what? That doesn't make any sense. That the people that can actually do things for you have more power than you. And that's not necessarily true. People with power can do things for you, and they may have better reach. They maybe have better influence. But there are things that juniors can do for you and peers can do for you as well. There's another concept that I want you to think about before we start to go in deep on who these people are, and that is reciprocation. We want to add as much value as we can to these relationships as they add to us. So when your mentors are there advising you based on their experience and giving you that good advice, these mentors are the people that you can come in to their office or their virtual office and cry if you need to share what's going on. You have that kind of relationship, or celebrate. You can be all of you, turn up the style flex, turn it up, right? They're sharing with you their best understanding of how to approach your career and leadership based on what they know in their career and also their learnings too. But how can you reciprocate with a mentor? I told this story with Kenya during ELC. There is an ELC member who to this day is one of my best mentors. He kind of flips sometimes and turns into a sponsor too. And he has a cameo in the book. But one day he called me on the phone. I was in the middle of doing whatever I am, and it's rare to get a call from X. That's what we'll call him. It's rare to get a call from X on your cell phone. So when you get it, you better pick it up. I pick it up and I'm thinking there's an urgent something going on. He's giggling like a young boy. He's like, I got to tell you the story. I was like, what? What is going on? He's like, okay. At the time, we had about 3 CEOs in the company. He was with one of the biggest, okay? And he's like, I'm with the CEO, and something has gone on Black Twitter where they're beginning to, what do you say, drag a couple of our officers. And he turned to me and he's like, what's Black Twitter? And he said, do you know I was able to explain it to him? And he understood. As it turned out, I was over corporate communications for diversity, equity, and inclusion at AT&T. This is what I did. And whenever we were in sessions, as much as he was dropping nuggets to me, I was dropping gems to him. I had no idea he was going to use it, and he did. So there's some cachet that comes with that, and it gives them even more of an incentive to drop your name as well. But it helps them, and they're incentivized to help you. Same with sponsors. And do you have any questions before I go on? Because I'm going to step through the sponsors and the other parts of the tribe. Kenya?
Our group right now is being shy with questions. So
Okay.
Go ahead and keep going. And then I'm going to turn up the pressure on our attending mentees and do a Q&A part for a while before we go back to our our already predetermined questions.
So remember, you've got your juniors and your peers in there. They can be mentors too. I don't believe in reverse mentoring because that implies power. When you understand that people know things that you don't, boy, that is rocket fuel to your career. If you understand that you have peers that are in rooms that maybe they're dealing with certain people that you're not, and they have some degree of influence or knowledge, peers can be like spies, people, reverse spies. They can bring you information. I used to love this, especially with my mentees, and they were good at it too. When I understood that the leaves were turning in different directions in the company and the winds were blowing certain ways, it's because my mentees were in my DMs. They were texting me, I'm in this meeting right now, and your name came up, and they didn't say something that was nice. And, I defended you, but you may need to think about X, Y, and Z when it comes to this particular topic. So I knew how to work around because I had my mentors and sponsors and peers and juniors in other rooms. Once I needed to change the entire trajectory of something the chief brand officer was doing that was going to ruin the reputation of our company with one tweet. And it was because she had worked around me. She knew that I had a group of 80 people that could deliver a POV that may not agree with what she had to do, and all of their VPs and SVPs would be behind it. Well, in the last hour, it came to me because somebody on her team cracked and was like, okay, El Michelle needs to see this because even I'm concerned about it. And I was able to work through my mentors and sponsors to get documents that somehow appeared on the desk, who knows? So they knew before they got on a call with this chief brand officer, and they were able to stop it in its tracks. You've got to have those layers of individuals all through the organization and beyond the organization. I'll speak on diversity too. It's important that everybody in your tribe does not look like you, think like you, work in the same company as you, work in the same industry as you. If you can diversify that mix of people that are at that virtual table with you, you will be unstoppable and you will learn things that you never thought would apply to what you're doing today.
Michelle, I want to dig into that a little bit because I hear people talk about what you call creating their network or their tribe, creating their tribe. And they're really good at doing it with people who look like them or in their circle. But it's just a little bit uncomfortable for them to get out of that and begin to do the work to bring people in who truly bring the diversity that their circle needs. Do you have any gems for us on how to do that?
Absolutely. So you need to. It's so important because as we were discussing, as we were on the run up to this call, Kenya, it's a numbers game. At the end of the day, there are not enough of us in corporate to do what we need to do to move the needle for one another. There are just not enough of us. How many Kenyas are there in the organization? I actually understand there are 3 very powerful Black women at ALTRIA, but there are 3. And they can't be stretched among all of you, right? So it makes sense that how many other people are out there? There are people of color that may not be Black. They may be Latinx. They may be white. They may be Asian. It should not matter. But I will tell you this, that you need to make sure that you are not limiting yourself to people who look just like you or act like you or work like you because their experience is going to be the same. And that's not going to enrich what you know as you move forward. So get involved in other ERGs. The ERGs are usually, and we call them employee resource groups. Some people call them business resource groups. They're open to anyone, allies or what have you. That may be a really good opportunity for you to get involved. You may want to get into one of those groups, the business networking groups that has a cross section of people that don't look like you. Other women, okay? Maybe they're not Black, maybe they're not Hispanic, but they're there and they're like-minded. That's what you're looking for, like-minded individuals. In the next book that's coming, it's called Yes, Please, 7 Ways to Say I'm Entitled to the C-Suite. It's important that we look at how to get to those people who don't necessarily look like us, because I interviewed 100 exceptional professional Black women and asked them by gender and by race who was the most helpful and who was the most harmful of those groups in their leadership aspiration. You probably will guess that both groups showed up on both ends of the spectrum. helpful and harmful, but they all kind of flipped gears or positions when it came to who was the most helpful and who was the most harmful. We introduced in the second edition of No Thanks. It's called No Thanks, 7 Ways to Say I'll Just Include Myself, the remix. It has 2 extra chapters in there. We introduced the most harmful. And as it turns out, it's a problematic white woman. That's not to say that all white women are this way, because white women show up on that helpful list too. I won't tell you where she shows up. You'll have to get the next book because it's in there. But white men also appear on the list for problematic. They're just a little bit lower. But guess what? I'll give you this one because I've talked about it. White men show up at the very top of the most helpful. Now, we explore how many different reasons why. I've gone on the record before the publication of this book sharing one of the reasons why, and I kind of just glossed over it. It's numbers. Think about it. If these companies were built to center white maleness and we are othered, it makes sense that there are more white men at the table so that there's a variety of mindsets and a variety of thought leadership, a variety of opinions, behaviors, and that there may be a good portion of them who will look beyond what we look like and look at our excellence and our value and just want to get the job done. Even more so now that we've made it into this time period where we watched the most incredible civil rights movement of our time in 2020. And there was a rebuke on anti-Blackness, a lot of people came into the light. Imagine these white men sitting at the table, more of them than there are of us, who are willing to take on mentorship and sponsorship roles as a result of being just a little bit more progressive. So the advice that I give in the next book is to make sure that you have at least 2 powerful white men in your corner. So there's some gems there.
Thank you. Yes, there was a whole lot of gems in there, Michelle. Thank you. I'm going to reach out to Courtney and Joy right now because it seems like there's some questions in the chat. So I want to take a minute.
Yes. Thank you for all of that. We do have a question around, as a Black woman, you know, some women go out of their way to sponsor and mentor other Black women. And by doing so, have your intentions ever been questioned? If yes, how did you reassure them that the guidance, though uncomfortable, was in their long-term best interest, though they couldn't see around the corner?
Okay, so is the question concerning the mentee, or is the question concerning folks on the outside looking in?
Right, folks on the outside questioning you, saying, I'm putting words into the question. Athalia, let me know if I'm wrong. But basically, all you're doing is wanting to mentor Black women, or you have a bias towards Black employees.
I get it.
That's what you're trying to do. So why? And they're questioning you on that, right? So how do you handle that?
Let me tell you, I've gotten that question not in that context, but in a very similar one. Remember, I said I actually built from the ground up the diversity, equity, and inclusion, corporate communications, and inclusion marketing capability at AT&T. Now, when you sit in those roles, they expect you to, do something for every segment, whether it's for the employees or whether it's external, dealing with all of the customers, the clients, the employees, the stakeholders, all of that good stuff. So they expect you to have this even hand. But what I've noticed is when you dial up the Black programs, like you would dial up something like the LGBTQ, you tend to get questions. And it's never that, oh, gee, this is great because you did this over here for, the Hispanic group. It's usually, well, you seem to concentrate so much on the Black employees. Maybe you need to spread that out a little bit more. The reason why I made that association and not the direct association that you mean is because when it came to actually mentoring people that look like me, I was so fortunate to work at AT&T where we had a CEO that around the table with the officers, it was not a secret that this man said, we are trying, white man now, okay? White, very white, mid-America, Randall Stevenson, okay? He was actually the first white CEO of record in a Fortune 500 to stand up and say Black Lives Matter. And I actually helped with that speech. But in 2016, he said that. And I wasn't shocked that he was ready to say that because of what he said to the officers in meetings before. He was concerned about getting Black talent through the pipeline. And he turned to the Black leaders and said, now here's my concern. We have all sorts of people of all sorts of colors and ilks around this table. I expect all of you to be pulling up Black leaders, but I expect every last Black leader that's here to be pulling up Black leaders, which really took a lot of those officers by surprise because they're used to hearing exactly what you've heard before. Well, if you have a circle and they're full of Black people, what are y'all doing over there? Is that reverse racism? The fact is, the question's going to come up, and you have to step into your boldness and be okay with it. In the book, we talk about how to build up the confidence so that when you're in these situations, you can move forward with the things that you know that are right, not fearing what could be coming your way. In most situations, there could be something coming your way. Political backlash, there could be something. But if you understand who you are, that you have upskilled, leaning outside of that organization to bring the kinds of skills back into the organization that bring you into that transformational leadership realm, that you have what my mentor coach, Trudy Bourgeois, calls FU money in the bank. Yeah, okay. That you have multiple streams of income, as Laverne Kit Beatty said to me in this book, that you will walk into a room, say what needs to be said, not edit yourself, and maybe even say it in a tone that shakes the pictures on the wall without fear of retribution or being called angry. Because you know that if that space doesn't deserve you, you can go to another space, whether that's inside of ALTRIA or somewhere else.
Thank you, Michelle. Joy, I believe there are several other questions here in the chat. Do you?
Yeah, Courtney also has a hand up. So Courtney, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, Joy. And thank you so much, Michelle and Kenya thus far. I want to build on a question that's in the chat. I dropped it in there and also added to what I just heard you say, Michelle. You mentioned step into your confidence with boldness without fear.
Yes. I didn't say without fear. Let's go back to that.
Okay. That's perfect, because that's exactly where I'm going. So I know I sometimes struggle with the confidence dial. We'll just call it that. Mm-hmm. And so in my struggle with the confidence dial, and maybe some other ladies on the phone have this too, as I walk in my new journey to understand and recognize my value, dial up my style flex, love that. How do I best stay out of my own head, especially when there's people that might not be my best fan? Mm-hmm. Because I'm, at the end of the day, human. So I would love some gems or some advice on staying out of your own head as you kind of navigate this new confidence journey. Mm-hmm.
Well, if you understand that knowing your value is the heroine or the hero in the book, you got to ask, who's the villain? The villain in the book is fear. And the villain never goes away. You know, the word fearless is not really a real word, because you can't have courage without the presence of fear. You can't be brave unless you have fear. So ultimately, you have to push through. And the question becomes how. You're right. We have these little voices in our head. As Trudy called it, the itty bitty committee. I call them gremlins. And they're natural. Let's understand how the mind works, okay? Neuroscience teaches us that we were hardwired from the very beginnings of time with negativity as something that actually helps us, okay? We're hardwired to be negative individuals, but let me tell you why. Go back to the beginning of time, and let's say you're naked and afraid in the bush in BC 25. Okay, you're holding your young and you hear a rustle in the bush. what's your first inclination? You will either fight that thing, whatever's coming, your blood pressure goes up, your body responds, and you're in this mode, right? Or you're going to run. You may run like hell, right? Save your baby, save everything. That's how we're basically built, okay? We are built with fear as a mechanism to protect ourselves. So give yourself a break. Fear is natural, okay? But we got to control it. Two things happen to women and women of color, and it happens to other people who are used to being marginalized too. And when we get around to white privilege, we're going to borrow some things from our friends over in that area because they have some things they can share with us, okay? Anyway, so if you understand that your mind is built with fear as its basic hardwiring, and you also understand that one, as people of color, when we walk into spaces, there are spaces without anybody even saying a word that double down on the negativity based on what they believe us to be or not to be. They don't even have to say a word. We can feel it in the air, okay? Sometimes we mistake that for imposter syndrome, when actually it's just the way the thing is built, okay? The second thing you need to understand is that many times as human beings, no matter who you are, we naturally have self-doubt. Self-doubt. Before we even get to imposter syndrome, there's a Wall Street Journal article in 2022 that talked about how women and women of color need to pump the brakes before they claim imposter syndrome. This term has been around since the 1970s, okay? And it's not necessarily new, but this is the cultural side of it. Our families, we're communal people. Black and brown people, community is important to us. It's a value. Our family is a value. We encircle one another and build each other up because we know that we go into that cruel world and they might not necessarily build us up. So we do that for each other. But when we get outside of that community and when we try to bring community into a capitalistic environment, push pull. We're in that corporate environment again, and we're thinking, my brother, my sister, and no, they're like, let's make money. That's very different. It's a very different mindset, okay? We're used to community, and we're going into rooms where the community is no longer there. And we're stripped of those things that give us the confidence and pouring the value into us. And we have these negative thoughts that come trickling in that come from other people. Now, the question becomes, do you buy into them? That's why this book is built on the foundation of affirmations, because our brains, and this isn't earthy, crunchy, it's not even spiritual at this point. It can be spiritual, but this is science. This is the way our brains are built. For every one negative thought that we have, our brains need to hear a positive thought at least 3 times to start to undo the negative thought. So to answer your question, Joy, or was it Courtney? To answer the question, you need to double down on the positive self-talk. And you need to get it into your brain who you are, despite what's going on in that room, despite that person that sits there that's not necessarily a fan. You have to know who you are, and you have to be committed to the fact that even if they say something bad about me, you have to start to think about what I do in case of that, okay? One of the most primary effective weapons against fear is a plan and information. 2 things, a plan and information. So go through your thinking before I go into this meeting and I say what needs to be said. What if this person or these people don't like what I have to say? Plan out the scenario. Now, let's go back to your board of directors. This is why this is like the primary avocation for yourself. You can't do it all yourself. Can't do it all yourself. Remember how I said that I had worked in such a way that this chief brand officer got the no, but it wasn't from me? There are some times that you need other people to plant seeds, to talk to other people, to work that thing before the person even comes into the room or even after they leave the room. So you need to activate your tribe. And one way to activate it is to let them know the mission you're on and what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, they don't really know what to do, and they'll just kind of be, okay, well, I thought about this opportunity for you. If you need something specific, and you should always have an ask, please put that on the table. But work your tribe and work your confidence, and understand that fear doesn't go away. You just push through it.
Well, I just want to say a thank you. I'm being note taker plus observer and learner at the same time. I appreciate that. And then I do want to say, Kenya, thank you for extending my tribe today. Because I might tap some ladies in this room as I keep my confidence on a high. So love your words, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah, and this group of eagles, y'all lean into each other. And this is the one thing I have stolen from Beyonce. I'm not even a huge Beyonce fan at all. But when she said fall in formation, ladies, get behind each other. This is the best way to, undermine a mansplaining or a whitesplaining when you're in the room. How many times have you seen this happen to one of your sisters and everybody was quiet, but you were in the room? Speak up. There's strength in numbers. And if a sister feels like she's not alone, believe me, her confidence will go up.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Michelle.
Look at the GIF.
Yes.
Information GIF. That's cute.
They are going crazy in the chat. Courtney, I want to make sure that I'm honoring our mentees. Are there other questions in the chat? I don't want to miss anybody.
I know Joy and I have been actively scrolling. I do see a hand that just raised from Wendy Baker. So maybe we pivot to her, and then I'll keep scrolling through.
Okay. And in fact, another hand went up as well. So let's start with Wendy. And then I can't see who put up the second hand, but I see that one went up. So let's go Wendy and then the next person.
And then Stephanie. So I'll keep watch of the order.
Thank you so much, ladies. And Kenya works on me once a month as as my mentor. But one of the things that I would like to say is, because Kenya has been working with me, I've been with Philip Morris for 25 years. So I've seen progression throughout the years. How do I get out of my head that it's not the same as it was years ago, so I can move forward and make something out of my career?
Is that really the question? Meaning, does it really rely on whether Philip Morris has changed or not for you to move forward?
Yes, if you know my story.
Okay. Well, I'll trust you on that. But the gist of the book, and you'll see it in the title, I'll just include myself. What that means is, despite what's going on all around you, you still find a way to move forward. So whether William Morris changed or not, and God bless them if they did, yay, you still have to move forward. So the question becomes, what am I willing to do that's outside of what I would typically do to move myself forward? And I'd ask you, what one little step that you can take today? You don't have to boil the ocean, but what small step towards your ultimate goal can you make today? And I would love for you to answer that right now.
I can't answer that today, Michelle. I can't answer it, but Kenya will hear it next month.
Okay. Sleep on it, marinate on it, and see what you need to do next. And I would tell you, read the book, because I came upon some pretty deep challenges, and here I am today.
Thank you.
Talking to you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for being brave in this space and asking your question. Thank you.
Thank you,
Ayana,
Wendy.
are we able to, Johanna, have we brought Ayana off? Oh, there she is. Okay. Hello, Ayana.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. So my question's a little different. Kenya knows when I first joined this company, I had no self-esteem. Like I didn't even want to move up, So we've worked hard, we've overcome that. I'm back in school, I'm ready for this journey. However, what I'm finding is I am bumping into other minority women of color who are still trying to step on my neck, trying to silence my voice, trying to steal my ideas, trying to belittle me. So in handling that, I don't want to be that mad Black woman, that angry Black woman. So I've been just taking a back seat and allowing it to happen. But how long?
Boy, there's a lot in that question.
Yes, there is.
I see that you have come across the effects of white privilege and how we as othered individuals feed into it. Did you know that we could be anti-Black too?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
learning that.
Yes. And it's because of the way the power center is structured. When we're othered, we think of it like a circle, okay? If someone else is centered and we're othered, we're part of that system. We're around the center, right? So some of us who don't know our value for ourselves definitely won't see it in you. So they will take that out on you and do worse to you in some cases than even, I've had folks that would do the racism better than the ones you would expect to do the racism.
Oh,
I get it. I get it. And as women, we do it to one another too, just as women, before we even get to being a Black woman. Now, you said something else. How do I avoid? Well, you said I've been avoiding being the angry Black woman. When does it end? That's what I heard you say.
yes.
Why can't we have emotions too? Are you legitimately angry? I'm not telling you to show up in a meeting angry, but I'm asking, is there
Yes.
legitimacy in the feeling that you have?
Yes. And I've tried to plan offsite lunches to try to just get to the bottom of, of course, every invitation has been declined. It's like, okay, this is a hurdle I know I'm going to have to get over. And this is probably not going to be the last time that I face this issue.
What's
so
really
what is
stopping you? I know that you've got chickens. That's what we call the ones that aren't eagles. You got chickens that are yapping at your feet. You're trying to soar. You're an eagle. Okay. What do you need to do? What's stopping you really? Is it really their yipping?
I think it's one is me being an associate manager, which is sort of the equivalent to a junior manager. This person being in a role that's a lot higher than mine, me not wanting to, rub people the wrong way to block, any of my future growth. So I'm like stuck like, okay, this is frustrating. What do I do with it? How do I address this? I'm a big fan of the one-on-one. Get them off site, talk one-on-one, because you never know what people are going through. Maybe there's something else going on there, but I can't get through,
Does
and
it
this
need
is
to
a
be
direct line of my growth. So
does it need to be addressed in order for you to move forward?
I believe so.
Okay. So you've tried the offsite, you've tried the coffees. What other options do you have?
I do not know.
You got to think about it.
Okay.
There's something.
Okay.
It really is on you, because no one else is going to come to you and say, here's what you got to do. Even Kenya and her wonderful mentoring. And let me tell you, this intrinsic motivation, this is what we're tapping into by me asking you that question to get you to answer it. Intrinsic motivation fuels your forward motion. There's extrinsic motivation, and that means somebody is sitting there going, now, Ayana, did you make that meeting? Did you make that next step? That would only take you so far. It's not sustainable. But that thing that you know deep in your gut, in your soul, that needs to happen, that's where you need to pull from. And if you're going, well, I've known this for a while, what's stopping me? That's what you need to hack. Whatever it is that's stopping you, ask yourself a series of questions. Why is this stopping me? Jot it down, write it down, put it in front of you so you can see it. And then start to think about, what do I do to mitigate this challenge? And you can't do it alone.
Thank you.
What resources do you need? People-wise, tools, skills.
Yeah,
And I want you to
what?
map
I have
out the
the
challenges
answer.
and the boundaries one by one. And you're going to fight each and every one of those with information and a plan.
You're right. You're right. The fear was going over their head, but that might need to be the next step. Thank you. Thank you.
So you did have the answer. Let me
Okay,
ask you this.
Michelle.
What's the fear?
Tattling on one of my sisters, you know.
So it's the
potentially-
community. It's a community piece that's coming in. That cultural, this is my sister. We are community in a very capitalistic space. Now, is she being capitalistic or community oriented with you?
Definitely not community oriented.
Okay. So you see the push-pull?
Yes.
There's a rub there.
Yeah. I got it. Okay,
You
I'm
can
getting
still
on
be
camera
nice,
now.
and you can still be gracious, and you can still be very professional in doing what needs to be done. But you need to talk to yourself and let the kind part of you that's community oriented know that she's right. And in any other kind situation, that would be doing the right thing. And forgive her and let her go.
Thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ayana. Stephanie?
Hi, Stephanie.
Hello. You began this conversation talking about telling your story,
Mhm.
and it really struck me at the onset because that's something that I have been really working on, particularly put a particular attention on it this year. So I was just curious, for someone who really wants to be better at storytelling or telling their own story, what would you recommend? What other tools, techniques would you recommend to someone who wants to improve in that area?
One of the first things I would tell you, Stephanie, is to think of the story that you're most afraid to tell because it exposes your challenges. And the reason why I say that is because usually when you've had a very low moment or a challenging moment or a tragic moment, between that moment and the next moment where you're on your peak, because they always come, you learned a lesson in between. Ask yourself what that lesson was. That's your leadership platform.
Okay.
Push through the fear and tell the story. The thing is that stories make you more relatable, and including the idea that it's more memorable because our brain loves to paint pictures. If you could tell a story with words and paint pictures with words, our brains love that. But suddenly you become more relatable. You also become more accessible. And when that happens, influence kicks in. So someone will hear your story and say, oh my gosh, if she went through that, I can do it too. Or they'll say, wow, that sounds just like what I. Listen, when you think about Oprah and you think about Michelle Obama, think about how they tell their stories. They don't tell the story of, well, I was first lady, and I married this very rock star leader, Barack Obama. No, she starts with, I was a little poor Black girl in the South Side of Chicago. Do you know why she does that? Suddenly we can all relate to her. And then you've got this whole, she's starting way down here and look at where she went. So start with one of the most vulnerable parts of your story, the most challenging, the one that will make you cry if you start talking about it. And then think about how you got over and that mountain that you ended up being on after all that happened. And then ask yourself, what were those lessons that I learned along the way? There's always a message in the mess.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Stephanie. Gina, one more. I do want to get to my favorite, affirmation in the entire book. So I want to leave us some space for that. But go ahead, Gina, and ask your question.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Gina.
Joy. Hello, how are you?
Good.
I recently did some research on a small scale, and what I found was that leaders are more willing to commit to be mentors as opposed to sponsors.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to know what you suggest women say or do to increase the desire and commitment for sponsorship.
Okay, very good question, Gina. This is important. I can only, and I'd be interested to know what some of the insights you develop from those findings is. But one of the insights that I will kind of throw my 2 cents in around why people are more apt and want to be mentors rather than sponsors is because you're literally putting your skin in the game. Like, that's no small sacrifice. That's your brand. And you have to believe in that individual so much to bang your fist on a table and put your name before their name. And, pretty much sacrifice yourself if they go down in flames. I mean, that it makes sense that people will say mentoring is safer because you can kind of pour into somebody. They could take or leave your advice. They go out there, but your name's not attached, right? Okay. So knowing what we know to be true about that, answer this question. Would it make sense to approach somebody that you really don't have a rapport with or a real relationship with and ask them to be your sponsor? I just want to see people in the chat raise your hand or say whatever. Does it make sense? Yes or no? No. Okay. This is why I make the distinction between the network. It's like a pyramid. At the very bottom, you've got your network, okay? These are the people you're connected with, but don't necessarily have a relationship with yet. You may have a rapport. It's a difference. They know you when they see you in a lineup, okay? You haven't nurtured a relationship. That next tier up is your community. And these are the people that actually know you. They know your work. They know you, okay? They're even willing to do something for you. May not be a huge thing, but they're willing to introduce you to someone, pass your resume along, and there's a little bit of advocacy in there, okay? Now, at the top tier of that pyramid, at the very tippy top, at the point of the triangle is what they say at the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. At the point of the triangle is your tribe. This is your ride or die. These people know you. They know your work. Even your mentors are even more advocates than mentors because they know you and you know them. And you'd be willing to reciprocate to them too, right? So where do you think your sponsors should come from in this pyramid? Before they make it to the point of the pyramid, the top of the triangle, the point of where should they come from? That's for anybody. In this pyramid, should they come from your network, your community? Where should they come from?
Community?
Your community. Very good. Community for 5,000 points. Community, okay? Why? Because these people already know you and they have this sense of advocacy. So I always tell people, shake the trees on your community. Shake them. These are people you already know. And start to audit and say, you know what? Who has that advocacy vibe to them? Who is the one that's just always calling my name? And then figure out what dynamic they have in the mission you're trying to achieve. If it makes sense, that they are the ones that you approach. Now, I'm saying approach because a lot of people want to go out there and pick a sponsor. And I understand because it seems quicker. But what I talk about in my book takes a little bit of time and a little bit of effort and some seed planting so that sponsor comes to you. And the reason why we want the mentors and the sponsors to come to you because they're invested. So you're not just cold calling, right? How many of y'all in sales? You understand? If you just pick up the phone to somebody you really don't know and just start reading talking points, what's the chance you're going to convert that person and close the deal? Next to zero, right? But if you can build that relationship in such a way that customer comes to you and says, Where do I put my money? And don't even ask how much. That's what you want. So in my situation, I built enough buzz around my brand. And the way I did it was not through doing this. It was about being excellent in all corners of the business where people were actually benefiting from it. The sponsors came to me. In fact, St. Marshall is the number one in that book that came to me after hearing me speak and hearing what I had done to put that program together. She pulled me down, had Jennifer Jones, who's a VP of diversity marketing, introduce who was that sister up there with the fro, telling folks she was holding court. What was she doing? Is she with AT&T? And she said to me that day, I want to sponsor you. Blew my mind. I wasn't even looking for one. But it blew my mind. That's the kind of buzz that you want to generate about yourself. And it wasn't just that I was sitting on that platform. She already knew of my work. And the icing on the cake was I was on that platform. So you want these sponsors to come to you. But if you can't wait that long, the best way to do it is to look for the advocates who already know you and are willing to do things for you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. Well, Michelle, we are going to go to affirmation number 7, because if we don't get to affirmation number 7, Joy's going to kill me. Okay. It's probably the most provocative affirmation in your book. And it's, I will take positive cues from white privilege because I'm entitled. I will take positive cues from white privilege because I'm entitled. Now, I know you worked with a clinical psychologist about this, and that psychologist confirmed that there are some positives that we can take from what we generally consider to be a very negative concept, white privilege. What are these positives, and why is it important for us to internalize some of those?
Okay. So the clinical psychologist, he's Dr. Jeff Gardier. You've probably seen him on CNN. He's even been on Basketball Wives. He's been everywhere. But Dr. Jeff has also written the foreword to the next book. So he writes even more in this book. But this was a conversation that I had with Dr. Jeff, and I cornered him on the podcast. And you can find the episode. It's back in maybe the first 100 episodes where I speak to Dr. Jeff and I raise this question. I said, Dr. Jeff, are there any positives that we as people who are othered can glean from the idea of white privilege? And he stopped, and he's usually full of words. At this point, he was not. And he said exactly what you said. This has to be one of the most provocative questions I've ever been asked. But as I think about it, absolutely. And let me tell you what they are. The first one is self-love. If you understand how privilege works, and there are all sorts of degrees of privilege. We talk about white privilege, but privilege is privilege. And it comes in a bunch of different forms. If I'm standing in the center of Howard University, in the square, over by the AKA tree, and I'm centered suddenly, I have a degree of Black privilege where no one is really going to question much about why I do what I do. I feel a degree of self-love right there in that courtyard. That's all that privilege is. Privilege says that I can be in charge in spaces in ways that shouldn't be questioned. This is why I've forgotten her name, the woman in Times Square, she's in the book, who had her dog on a leash, and the Black man comes up to her and said, oh, it wasn't on a leash, it's leash, excuse me. He says, you need to leash your dog. Yeah. And Amy says, well, how dare you, and calls the police. Well, in this situation, Amy had already centered herself as the one who was in charge. Okay. She loved herself so much that she had some caucasity. And so ultimately what we're saying is you got to reach for some of that in a positive light, reach for the self-love, and have confidence. That's the next thing. They have confidence in themselves, confidence that came from somewhere else. In this case, it came from the institution. The minute they were born, they knew they had dominion. We have to rewire ourselves to even think that way, because there's a term called epigenetics, and it talks about the trauma that's on our DNA over the years, all the way back from slavery. There are things that we do and ways that we act that are etched into our DNA all the way back from slavery. So there are some self-doubts that we have that came all the way back from Papa's Papa and Grandma's grandma. Okay? So it takes a little bit more for us. And this is why I thought positive psychology is so crucial. Access to this for our sisters is so incredibly important, because this is what it takes. Whatever you think, that's going to be your path. That's going to be your future. So if you get the self-love, if you can get to the confidence, if you can start to center yourself in spaces that don't center you, you're going to walk taller. You're going to leverage some of that privilege that we watch Amy leverage in Central Park, but in a better way, because it's going to be tempered. We know better because we've been in worse situations. It's one of our superpowers too. We've got some EQ and some cultural intelligence that other folks don't have because we've been othered, and it's built this resilience in us. And we know what it feels like to be left out. So you're always going to walk in grace. You're always going to be professional. I don't want to get on my soapbox, but I don't know why we are so afraid of being called angry Black women, because how many of you have actually gone on a tirade in a meeting or at the job? Raise your hand. None of you? It's because we actually know how. We have learned how to stifle that stuff and answer with such grace and just put these beautiful words together. We don't do that. So let that go. Don't be afraid of that, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You haven't let it happen. It's not going to happen yet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Joy, I don't want to leave this topic without giving you a chance. Do you want to say something about this topic? Do you want to weigh in on this topic at all, Joy?
Oh, no, Kenya, you have it. Just when I read it, everything Michelle just said, it was just those positive cues that she mentioned, and she said it the whole time, knowing our value, walking into the room like you belong to be there. It just resonated with me. So no, keep going. You
Okay.
hit on everything that I wanted you to hit on. Thank you.
Okay. I do want to, and I know we're close on time, but I do just want to have you underline a part of it where you talked about many of us, we have varying degrees of privilege too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what privileges those are and how we might be able to leverage them or better leverage them for good, even as we kind of sit in this kind of double outsider or double disadvantage in corporate America?
Yes. So in the book, you hear me talk about fine people, fine clothes, fine cars. And that was because when I first walked into an elevator at AT&T, I had never seen. Oh my goodness. They must have just finished an ERG meeting or something, but they came off of that elevator in all of their beautiful suits and Louboutins. I mean, these sisters and brothers were just snatched. And I had never seen anything like this. And they all got off the elevator, and I just, and they giggled at me. I said, "Where did you come from?" And they laughed, and they're like, "Welcome to AT&T," because they'd never seen me before either. But I mentioned that because I call that pockets of Black privilege. That was a pocket of Black privilege like that. Not just because they were well dressed, but because these were educated, credentialed, some of them tenured, just beautiful people who were educated and had everything they needed to have to be walking the halls like that at a Fortune 6. Let that marinate for a second. That is a pocket of Black privilege. Just like I said, I'm standing in the middle of HBCU at Howard University by that AKA tree. I was in a pocket of Black privilege. Education is one of those things that puts us at the top of the heap. In fact, I can call myself a scholar. I'm an adjunct professor at Texas Christian University, a PWI, one of the few professors of color in that university. It's a privilege to be able to even stand in that space or even call myself that. There's financial privilege. You may not be, you know, doing like Jay-Z and Beyonce right now. However, you are in a position of privilege because you have access to benefits and stocks and a paycheck that comes steady every 2 weeks. And you know what it's going to do, and you can put some away, and you can go get that Fendi bag and put on your red bottom shoes and fly to Dubai with the girls or Accra if you want to. That's privilege. You've got privilege that other people don't have. In fact, there are layers to privilege inside of cultures. I had a Latina. It was a woman that came to me after speaking to me, and she said, I feel like I have some privilege. Am I wrong to say this? And she talked about how her people immigrated over here, some of them from Spain, and that she had light skin and she was able to get into places that other people couldn't get. And she recognized that she had brothers and sisters who were also Hispanic that didn't have that easy a time, that had to come over here and almost risk getting deported, that some of the people had to start restaurants and maybe didn't even have their visas, that maybe there was colorism that was happening, and maybe they weren't as light as she was, and they weren't afforded these things, that she knew people who had been deported. She said, I recognize that I have privilege even though I am in an underrepresented group. And my sisters, that's where we are. As people who are sitting in the midst of a Fortune 500, ALTRIA, was it the John Thompson companies? What's the parent company?
Altria.
Yeah, what's the parent company of ALTRIA?
Altria is the parent company. We
Okay.
have other operating companies like Philip Morris
Gotcha.
USA and USSTC.
Gotcha. Okay, because the
But Altria
announcer
is
at
the parent.
ELC had this other, the John Thompson companies, family of companies, something like that. Anyway, you are so blessed and highly favored to be a part of that. How can you wield those opportunities and that position of authority to open doors for other people that look like you? And because I found that pocket of privilege at AT&T, I was reintroduced to ELC in a way that I hadn't been before. I'd been to the Kayla, but nobody had sent me to Leadership Development Week, where I would sit with 250 other women of color who were general managers, VPs, directors, SVPs, and learn how to get to the C-suite. And that's where I met Trudy Bourgeois, who I've been quoting out the wazoo this entire time. And it was that interaction that I had with Trudy and also with the mentor that sent me that got me on the path of discovering my value. So yes, it was a pocket of Black privilege that put me on my journey to becoming who I am today and talking to you right now.
Michelle, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are at time, but I do not want to let us go without doing a couple things. One, I can tell from the chat, people do not want this time to end. We are going to make Michelle's resources available to you. I don't know if we're putting it in the chat or we're sending it out in the meeting maker. Joy can let us know about that, but her resources will be made readily available to this group of distinguished women. The other thing is, I want us to end on a toast. This is Mocktails and Mentoring, and we cannot depart without our mocktails and a quick toast. So I'm going to end us pretty much off where we began. Okay? Here's to being intentional about investing in ourselves, recharging our batteries, refilling our cups, re-energizing our souls. Here's to the commitment to taking on the work and the challenges to fulfill our leadership aspirations, and knowing that when we do that work, we deserve our aspirations. Have an awesome weekend.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.